Kandake Amanirenas, the greatest African woman of all time. Bawa, the fairy tale Sudan of Nubia, was ruled by a dynasty of women who bore the title Kandake, Candace. As Empress and Regent, Amanirenas was distinguished by her exceptional warrior and political skills. After Amanirenas, Amani Shaketo and Amani Tore came to the throne. Amanirenas came to the throne after the death of her husband, the Emperor Tereketes, in 4196 of the African era, 40 BC. The queen's name means Amani is her name. Amani is a Nubian name for Imana, Amon, unique god of Africa. Kandake Amanirenas, identified here by G.C. Kuvi Gomez on Bawa's Beg Pyramid No. 6. On the northern border of Bawa was the Egyptian daughter of Nubia, who had not been ruled by the Kamtiu blacks for 500 years. In 4203, the Romans defeated the Greeks, who had occupied the country for 300 years. During the heyday of his reign, Emperor Augustus Caesar made Egypt one of his provinces and decided to take Sudan. Amanirenas and her son, the hereditary prince Akinidad, broke into Egypt. In the line of the Sudanese extraordinary military qualities, Kandake, at the head of their troops, approached the Romans, who were impressed to see a woman as military chief. She lost an eye on the battlefield but defeated the Europeans in Aswan, Philae, and Elephantine. The Nubians had returned with prisoners of war and spoils of war, including the busts of Augustus Caesar, one of which was buried under a temple dedicated to victories. The Romans took back southern Egypt, managed to take advantage of it, and came to Nubia. They withdrew, but set up military bases in Nubia and tried to take Amanirenas back. Our pyramids. The Nubians and Romans started negotiations. Kandake sent mediators to meet Augustus Caesar. At the end of the negotiations, they signed a treaty that was quite beneficial to the Nubians. The Romans loved the barrier, and the Africans did not have to pay taxes for Rome. These very favorable agreements for the Africans suggest that the latter ultimately made use of military advantages or permanently neutralized the Roman army. This victory marked the beginning of a period of peace and prosperity when Bawa became the beacon of Africa for 300 years. Kandake Amanirenas died in 4226. All emperors of the Bawa after Amanirenas held the title of Kandake in honor of her. The latter is the most powerful African woman because of her military achievements, exceptional courage, unique ability to preserve her land and ensure longevity. Amanirenas and Akinidad, author of the illustration, unknown. Ramses II asks God to protect the black people. Ramisu Marimana Ramses II, Karnak Temple, in 2962, the African era, Ramisu Marimana led his troops into the mythical Battle of Pradesh in what is now Syria, where the story of his legendary achievements began. The African armies withdrew from the enemy, leaving the pharaoh almost alone on the battlefield, suffering some defeats. The king of Egypt then called on Imanu-Ra, Amen-Ra, the unique god of Africa. That call enabled him and drove him to change the situation. After the battle, Ramisu Marimana, the victor, returned to Africa and was no longer regarded as an ordinary king, but as a true Sa-Ra, son of God. This prayer is still very important to us today. I'll call you, O our Father Amen-Ra, we're among many people. We don't know one whose intentions are hostile to us. The other nations have once again allied against us, to harm Kenites, blacks, and steal their wealth. We are alone. There is nobody by our side. Here I raise my prayer. From the ends of the barbaric lands, my call reached Vasset, Pradesh, and I can hear your footsteps coming towards us from afar. Glory to you, O Amen-Ra, the master of the universe. To read the full biography of the great king, click here. International trade during the time of the African empires. The High Imperial African era, from 300 to 1500, was a golden age in the history of the Black Continent. The various states had economic relations with the 4 other continents. This article gives you an overview of the intensity of these trades. Trade with the East. Berber and Arab caravans roamed the Sahara to exchange goods between Africa and the Arab world. According to the Arab chronicler Bakri, the hippopotamus skin whip produced on the Senegal River enjoyed an international reputation. Gold, which was incredibly abundant in West Africa, was exported. Salt, wheat, raisins, and figs were also imported. Iranian bowls were found in Mwene Mutapa, Zimbabwe, finds in Iran and Iraq in the Sahelian civilization, Tanzania, Kenya. Somali coins in the United Arab Emirates. The Arabs had settled on the East African coast, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique, and traded intensively with Africans. 18th century paintings illustrating the relationship between Africa and the East. An Iranian delegation is received by the King of Ethiopia, certified by Runoko Rashidi. Trade with East Asia and Oceania. Trade between Africa and Asia was mainly due to the rich East Coast and the empire of the Mwene Mutapa. These exchanges had created an opulent group of black marketeers on the entire East Coast. Africans exported their products to China and India. The discovery in Australia of 1,000-year-old coins from the large town of Kilwa, Tanzania, updated by the team of Australian anthropologist Ian McIntosh, confirms that trade has also reached Oceania. Chinese porcelain was found in the tombs of Mwene Mutapa. Gold, tin, and copper were extracted from the soil of the empire. The products were exported through the ports of Salafa in Mozambique. The specialists estimate the amount of tin extracted at 30,000 tons. The seafarers at that time were mainly Arabs and Asians. Despite the existence of Swahili navigation and the testimonies of blacks who sailed the Indian Ocean, the wealth of East Africa, where according to a proverb ivory beds were accessible via silver ladders, made adventure in the high seas unnecessary for Africans. Mwene Mutapa's mining activities served as economic leverage for the entire East Coast. In addition, coins from Vietnam and Sri Lanka were found in Somalia. This exchange facilitated the establishment of diplomatic relations between the Slavic Somali civilization and China, which had ambassadors in the respective states. Swahili coins in Australia discovered by Ian McIntosh's team in 2013. Trade with Europe. Since the black rule of Southern Europe in the Maghreb, intensive trade has enabled prosperous cities to emerge. During the Black Almoravid dynasty, gold from West Africa was used to mint coins as circulated in the European parts of the empire, where they were called marabouttins. A particularly sophisticated customs organization enabled the black civilization of Imperial Morocco to increase their wealth. The cities of Spain, Massa, and Genoa were trading centers with North Africa. The black dignitaries of Maghreb played chess in Spain. Source: The Golden Age of the Bog. Ivan van Septima, page 29. The European material was found, the mantelpiece with which the Mansa Suleiman, emperor of Mali at the time of the chronicler Ibn Battuta, dressed. Black and white Berbers and Arabs were the facilitators of this trade. Trade with America. Trade with America is also documented. Afro-Guyanese historian Ivan van Septima, father of the historiography of the presence of Africans in ancient America, gives us some of them after consulting the archives of Christopher Columbus himself. The occupation of the latter had seen the great blacks in America. The Haitian Indians had told Columbus that the blacks came in big boats to trade. Today's navigators from Columbus told him that there were ship departures from the West African coast to America. The most positive element is that in Spain Columbus analyzed a spear from Haiti that contained exactly the same composition of metals as those from West Africa. Apart from these trading spears, Van Septima reports on a large presence of the Mandingos in the Central American markets. And here, in contrast to relations with the Arab world and Asia, it is the blacks themselves, the Mali Empire and the Songhai Empire, who traveled across the Atlantic. Mansa Abubakar Keita II, Emperor of Mali, crossing the Atlantic in 1311. It is the journey that would have opened the intensive trade relations between West Africa and America, illustration by Ephra Burns. The advanced economy of the Kongo Empire. The Kongo Empire was an ancient state in Angola, both in Congo and Gabon. We have talked about the general history of this kingdom here. We will give you a brief overview of its economy. The currency was made from grenades collected by women on the island of Luanda and only exploited by the state. The harvest was monitored and counted by royal officials and carried out under the direction of Mani Luanda. the island's governor, who was also responsible for the transfer to the capital, Mbanza, Kongo. The currency was called Nzimbu, more precisely Nzimbu Kutombe and Nzimbu Ambumbi. Nzimbu enabled the exchange and toll collection of the local governors by the central government. It made it possible to regulate public spending. Luanda, the ancient city of the Congo Empire, is located in what is now Congo-Brazzaville. Reproduction by the Dutch historian Alfred Dapper in the 17th century based on authentic descriptions. Taxation. The specialized administration ensured that the central government's income was recorded and accounted for. 3 organs of civil servants were assigned to taxation. It was the Mfutilas, the Mani Mpanzas, and the Mani Sambas. The Mani Sambas were responsible for collecting tolls and taxes on goods. Metallurgy. Iron ore was abundant in the kingdom and flourished on the surface of the ground in the form of ferrous stones. Many iron workshops were set up on the hills near Mbanza, Congo. They produced weapons that were necessary for the defense of the empire and its territorial expansion. They also produced household tools, axes, and hoes for the rational use of land and forest. Copper was also processed, especially in today's Congo-Brazza. Agriculture. The Ba-Congo were known as arborists and skilled farmers. Several types of millets and millets were grown. Bananas and dozen types of yama were produced. The abundance and diversity was so great that they cultivated 12 kinds of food crops, each one right for a specific month to get fresh food all year round. Cattle breeding was also practiced. There were ox, sheep, goats, pigs, and birds from the poultry farm. Textile. The imagination remains forever shaped by the tales of the explorers. Restored by the German historian Leo Frobenius, who described the inhabitants of the Congo as people clad in silk and velvet, civilized to the bone marrow. Several palm trees were methodically grown for the textile industry. High-quality fabrics are made from their fibers. Brocade was called Inkolimba. Velvet was called Nzaka. Damask called Infulas. Satin's maracas, taffeta called Fong. The Amoizins and Gombos. Nzingambimba, Alfonso I, Emperor of the Congo. Illustration by Carl Owens. The markets. The market called Nzandu was the ideal place for exchanges. In Mbanza, Congo, it was the main center for exchange, redistribution and fashion arbitration. The Ba-Congo should show good judgment, especially for trade, said Balandier. The Ba-Congo have attached extraordinary importance to the market institution. This network of connections is an extraordinary phenomenon. This whole economy, admirable for its organization, development, and sophistication, will be destroyed by the Portuguese attacks during the slave trade. The magnificent sculptures of the Ife civilization. Almost 1,000 years ago, the Yoruba built some cleverly organized cities in southern Nigeria, with Ife as their religious capital. The Yoruba civilization emerged from the union of the country's indigenous people and migrants. These indigenous peoples are the origin of the Nok civilization and their brilliant 2,500-year-old terracotta sculptures. The migrants in question are likely to be Egyptian Sudanese. The people of the Nile took in the locals and absorbed their arts, which they subsequently enlarged. Yoruba sculptures. The Egyptian origin of the Yoruba was revealed through the work of Olumide Lucas in The Religion of the Yorubas, published in 1948. Aside from the linguistic, religious, and sociological similarities with ancient Egypt, there are few words in the language of Greek and Roman origin that make it possible to claim that the Yorubas rubbed shoulders among these European peoples in Egypt. The Yorubas have made the city of Ife the place of excellence that represents the creation of the world by Olodumare, God, their holy city and their political seat. The Edo people are said to come from this city. The Edo founded the respected Benin civilization in the south. Nigeria experienced at the beginning an extraordinary concentration of civilizations with Nok, then the huge Yoruba and Hausa cities, Benin, the empire, the Kanimbonu, with the high culture of the Igbos and their pyramids on Sude. You will discover the genius of the ancient Yorubas through the following photos. Her sculpture, dedicated to members of the clergy and royalty, is essentially that of Benin, the most refined and successful of the African imperial era. These bronze and terracotta sculptures amaze Europeans who tried in vain to find them a white origin. The Ife civilization would collapse with British colonial intervention at the end of the 19th century. On the left is a prince. The precision and realism of the sculptures are in the order of magnitude of perfection. On the left, the Oni, the king and religious leader of the Yoruba. There are scarifications that are very present in the art of life. The sculpture on the right represents a lady. Somali civilization. Far from the contrasting image it reflects today, Somalia was living a golden age through the civilization of the people who named it. We will tell you about the glorious side of the story, Zayla, origins. The Somali people, together with the Oromos, Afars, Sidamos, and Bejas, represent the great Cushitic people. Kush is the ancient name of Sudan and is even documented in the writings of the pharaoh Akhenaten. It appears that the Somalis came from a branch of the first Sudanese. Before their Islamization, they practiced the African religion, and the Somali language is an African language. The thin features and straight hair of the Somalis form a variant of the black race without crossing. The Somalis have probably been in Somalia, Djibouti, and Ethiopia since ancient times. The Somalis, the emergence of Somali civilization. The appearance of this civilization, like everyone else on the East African coast, is ascribed to the Arab and Persian settlers who came around the 9th century. And through commercial activities with the East and Asia, the Somali people would have reached the imperial dimension. However, extensive research has put this official version at risk. The oldest city on the East Coast appears to be a city called Rapta, which was documented by the Greeks 2,000 years ago. In 2016, off Tanzania, researcher diver Alan Sutton discovered the ruins of a large, sophisticated city that could be Rapta. In addition, an examination of the architecture of the Sahelian civilization in Tanzania, Kenya, revealed that it was neither Arabic nor Persian, but African. Roman coins were discovered in Somalia and Tanzania, which leads us to conclude that the Africans from the East Coast traded internationally before Arab contact. After all, the populations and kings that explorers saw in the region were very black, even blacker than today's populations. All of this shows that the East Coast civilizations were present before Arab and Persian contact. Since Islamization should penetrate Somali civilization deeply, chances are it is African. The ruins of an ancient village that is 4 kilometers in size, which is where Tanzania is located, that will be overshadowed in 2016. An example of the giant blocks of the coral tail raptor, ruins of an ancient city with a width of 4 kilometers in Tanzania, which was discovered in 2016, and all the huge blocks of carved coral raptor. So, as researcher Matthew says, all of these East Coast cities were essentially African. It is becoming increasingly clear that they cannot be considered Arab or Persian colonies. According to the descriptions of medieval geographers, these were residents undoubtedly black and even had a Nigota tribe and that of today's population. The organization of the Somali Sultanates. The Somali cities were divided into sultanates in Somalia, Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. Among them are Adal, Ifat, Sajuran, Wargansali, Mogadishu. The Sultan of Mogadishu had ministers, legal experts, commanders, and many other officials. There were a few eunuchs and courts. The Arab traveler Ibn Battuta described the presence in the royal procession of men carrying umbrellas with a golden bird over them. He noted that the practice was identical to that of West Africa, Mali Empire. The great bird Horus, associated with the ruler, also found in Egypt, Madagascar, Zimbabwe, and among the Yorubas, shows that Somali power was basically African. In the 14th century, the Arab traveler Ibn Battuta described the elites in silky outfits and a sultan in a large fur coat, imported from Jerusalem with Egyptian linen on the edges, a silk loincloth, and a turban. The old port of Mogadishu. Commercial activity was one of the pillars of the Somali economy. Mogadishu was inhabited by many wealthy merchants. Somali exports included high-quality fabrics, gold, and ivory. The port activity was highly developed. The entire East African coast, from Somalia to Mozambique, enjoyed exceptional economic prosperity, enhanced by the mining activities of Zimbabwe. The Somali Sultanates issued their currency, and the coins bore the names of successive rulers. The presence of these coins is confirmed in the United Arab Emirates. Coins from Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and China have been found in Somalia. In the 15th century, there were Somali ambassadors in China and vice versa. In the markets, there was an abundance of camel meats, wheat, barley, spices, fruits, etc. The Somalis ate so well that they were obese. Somali cities and their architecture. In the 15th century, a Chinese who came to the Mogadishu reported high stone houses with 4 to 5 floors. But it was the Arab traveler Ibn Battuta, who had visited much of Africa in the 14th century, who left us the most valuable description of the Somali cities. Ibn Battuta, who had visited Asia and the Arab Muslim world, detested Zayla, which was faced with urbanization problems, and said although it is a big city, it was the dirtiest, the most unpleasant city in the world. Then from Mogadishu he says that it is an oversized city, a qualifier used by an Arab of the day that is comparable to that of an American today who would use the same words. Mogadishu was gigantic. Vasco da Gama said the Mogadishu in the 15th century that it is a large city with imposing palaces and mosques with large cylindrical minarets in the middle and 5-story high-rise buildings. Marka, Gandesha, Hafumi. Pay attention to the works of arts that are created at this entrance. Mogadishu. Talea. The decline of Somali civilization. Somali civilization declined due to the attacks by the European slave trade. In the 17th century, the great Somali cities were nothing but the shadow of themselves before they fell under Arab rule. That side of the story was told here.